Welcome everyone to the January SVPMA monthly meeting. We typically meet the first Wednesday of the month unless there are holidays or other things that are in the way. And January being January, we are meeting later this month, but please keep an eye on the website for future events. This evening, we're pleased to have Rich Mironov, a former SVPMA board member and longtime product management expert speaking. He has been a featured speaker at Product Camp, Silicon Valley, as well as many other product camps, and has always drawn large crowds. People really are enthusiastic about hearing his observations on the world of product management. So with that, Rich, take it away.
Great. Thanks very much, Tom. Thanks everybody for taking time out from your evening or morning or wherever it is that you happen to be. This is a new talk for me. I pulled it together from some pieces of other things. So if I lose my way, please excuse me. I'll write it off to age. But we're going to try to take apart a little bit of the challenge of getting onto the product management ladder. So really what I'm thinking of there is folks trying to get their very first product management gig, their first product role. And then the next big step up there is from the individual contributor to the sort of first line director or group product manager or whatever your company happens to call it. So we won't be at an executive level stuff. We're really on those first two steps. I did provide the PDF, so that'll be shared out after we're done in case anybody was wondering about that. Okay, so let's dive in. Just introducing myself. I've been doing software product management, almost all enterprise, since the late 80s. So anybody who thought product management was a new thing, not so much, right? When I started, actually, we called the cloud time sharing because that's what we had in those days, right? And you didn't have desktop computers, you had terminals. But anyway, been doing it a long time. I was a VP of product a bunch of times. One horrible terrible turn as a CEO, did 6 startups in my day. I've been independent since more or less 2001. And a lot of that was what we called the smoke jumper VP product jobs. So over the years, I've dropped into more than a dozen companies as their interim or temporary head of product because they forgot to have one, or they misplaced the last couple, or nobody was quite sure, right? And these days, mostly what I'm doing is I'm coaching chief product officers and VPs who are running sizable groups of product management teams, sometimes with design as well in there. So that's the current work. Off to the right is a really old piece of work. That's a book of mine from 2008. And just to fill out that thought, I've been blogging about software product management since 2001. Because blogs didn't really exist before 2001. It was a newsletter a few years before then, right? And then, those of you who may have been on the Yahoo campus in 2008 for the very first product camp that a bunch of us threw. Yes, Mark's giving me some noise there, right? Tom was there. I quite accidentally threw the first product camp. And I'm happy that other people are taking that because I'm no longer interested in being in charge of it, but it's grown, it's spread, and there's all kinds of variations around there, which thrills me because the best thing you can do is create something for the world and then let it go and have it thrive on your own. Okay, so that's me. Let's get to an agenda. Here's our agenda, our little podium there. So here's the quick things we're going to talk about. What do product managers do? Honestly, it's a philosophical question and no two people have the same answer, but we'll take our try, right? Some hiring side biases. Again, let me remind you, most of my work these days is with VPs of product, CPOs, and executive teams. So I'm going to be telling this story not from the candidate side, not from the I want to be in product management, but how do we see it from the other side of the desk, right? And I put out a blog post, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago about the war for talent. And we're in this very odd place where, on the one hand, every single VP product and CPO I talk to is trying desperately to fill jobs of mostly senior product managers. In fact, if you looked on LinkedIn, just as a place to start, I ran the query a couple minutes ago. If you search for product manager jobs in the United States, you see something on the order of 242,000 open positions. Gosh, right? So that must be a lot of opportunity. On the other hand, everybody I talk to who's trying to get into their very first product job is having a hard time for the most part. So it's this odd duality of It's the hottest job on the planet for the next 2.2 milliseconds, and everybody wants it, but we can't seem to fill the jobs with the people we want. Okay, so we're going to talk about my biases there, some thoughts about how you get into the game, right? How do you get that ticket punched the first time? A little bit about product directors and how people might think about moving up from the individual contributor to the product director, and we'll have some time for Q&A. Good, so let's roll ahead. And this is a chart I built. I'm thinking it's got to be at least 15 years ago, but I was trying to explain to my engineering team what product folks do. And of course, in order to do that, we needed an input-output diagram, because that was the only thing my engineers were going to understand. So we're going to paint that diagram one at a time. Notice I put product management in the middle, not at the top. Nobody works for us, right? And here's three very distinct groups that we interface with, right? Development, actually lately I've been calling that the maker side of the house, because not just developers, it's designers, it's DevOps, it's tech writers, it's all the makers who actually put stuff into the product so that we can ship it, right? So you got makers on the left. On the right side, I've carefully divided your company's marketing and sales team from the markets and the customers. Everybody on your sales team will tell you that they represent the customers. They don't. So the dashed line there is really important. And above that, almost all of your companies have some execs. So we're going to go around the circle here and ask the question of, what is it that product management's expected to provide, and what do we get back? See what we'll learn from that. Okay, so easiest on the development or the maker side. First time product folks always say, oh, what we give them is tickets or specs or user stories. Not so much, okay? So I have a long list of things, and it starts with market information, insights, priorities, roadmaps, epics, all these other things, customer interviews. We put the user stories or the backlogs or things near the bottom, because honestly, they're not as important as having our development teams, our designers and our engineers really, really understand what customers are trying to do and what their problems are. Because I don't know if you guys know this, there's good science that tells us that all developers are smarter than all product managers. And we know this because if we ask them, they tell us, right? So the idea that we as product managers are going to tell our engineers exactly what to do and write all the specs, first of all, there's a lot of pushback. Second of all, we're wasting all the smarts, right? So this is a collaborative discussion between product managers and all the folks on the maker side about whether we understand the problem and how we might solve it in lots of different ways. It's not just writing down a ticket. Okay, what do we get back? The engineers all tell me that they ship product. They don't. What they ship is the bits, and I'm thinking software here, but the product bits are the bits of software we create. We'll see in a moment, that's not the whole product. And so the engineering view that says we build the product and we're done, partly right. Good, let's keep going. Marketing and sales. Again, I'm an enterprise guy, so I'm gonna think about this from an enterprise point of view. What do my marketing and sales teams want, especially my sales team, right? Notice this is a completely different list. Segmentation, messaging, benefits. Salespeople don't care about features. Pricing, although they would like to set the pricing instead of me. Qualifications, demos. This is all a list of things that are about what should we say? Give us the sentences to repeat to our customers, then again get them excited and give us money. Do they actually care what the products do? Not so much, right? And then when we get something back, what's the return values from marketing and sales, especially sales? I'm going to call it field input and market feedback, but I should probably put those in quotes, because another bit of data that you may or may not know, but I've checked with more than 100 enterprise sales teams around the world over my days. If I ask them, if I survey your enterprise sales team and I say, what's the number one reason we won deals? It's always the same, right? Jim knows. The number one reason we won deals is because we are great salespeople, right? By the way, all salespeople are above average, okay? Just ask them, okay? And there's two reasons we lost deals, and it's never salesmanship, okay? The two reasons we lost deals are we were missing these, I don't know, 20 or 600 features, whatever it was, and the price was too high, okay? So consistently when we ask our sales team on the enterprise side, why we won and why we lost. We learned that they're great salespeople, that we should lower our price again, and we're a few hundred features short. Okay, not that useful from a product management side. So the most important arrow on this whole chart, this one, is the one where product managers talk directly with, unmediated by anybody else. We talk directly with real users, real buyers, former buyers, churned customers, folks who bought the other thing, partners, channels, right? When I parachute into a company and I temporarily take over the product management team, I usually get an hour or 45 minutes or something with each of my new direct reports. And we chat, and we have a nice time. They introduce themselves. And somewhere in there, I carefully slip in the question of, how many customers did you talk to in the last 2 weeks that weren't sales calls? And the ones who tell me none and who are not embarrassed almost always get an immediate promotion to some other department in the company. Because if you're not talking to customers and you're not embarrassed about it and there's no organizational reason that's blocking you, I don't think you're a product manager. And if you don't talk directly with the folks who buy and use your stuff, I think you lose the right to give any direction on the development or maker side, because you're getting it third hand through people who are filtering it for all kinds of reasons. So that's the most important arrow on the chart. Last couple, just to finish it out, everybody's got executives, right? What do the executives want from us? Oh, strategy, forecast, commitments, roadmaps, all this stuff. Importantly, every one of these in the minds of our executives is denominated in money. Hint, if you're talking to your executive team and sentences are coming out of your mouth that are not denominated in money, they're not listening to you, right? They don't care. And what do we get back from our executive team? What's the return code here, right? It's budgets, it's staff, it's targets. By the way, it's never a budget to hire more product managers. It's always a budget to hire more engineers, because somehow we're going to get more done, right? And the target, usually the revenue target there, is exactly what we put in our PowerPoint slides, but just move forward a couple of quarters, right? So the reason I go through this great long exercise is to notice, first of all, that we have no authority here. And second, if you're going to sit in that weird, odd gray box circle in the middle, you have to be trilingual. You have to speak enough developer and designer that they don't disinvite you from the stand-ups and lock you in the closet and make fun of you, right? You have to speak enough end customer that you can really, really empathize and understand what problems they're trying to solve, as you ignore all of the solutions that they propose, because they're mostly wrong, right? But you've got to skip over all the salespeople, not necessarily believe what they're telling you, go to the source, and you have to understand and empathize. And then you have to have enough back of the envelope finance. By the way, finance is under $100,000. Finance is anything over $100,000. But you have to have enough back of the envelope finance to explain to the execs why they should keep investing in your products, because it's going to make them money in the future, right? So this is a very odd, strange place. Nobody's born wanting to do this, right? We all want to be firefighters or cowboys or something, right? Whatever it is. And it's honestly, it's not a match for most people. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of edges. There's a lot of stakeholders. Soft skills really matter. When somebody tells me they think they want to be in product management, I usually take the first 5 minutes to see if I can sell against. Because if they're not sure, there's probably something that's a better fit. Okay, so here's the diagram version. Of course, if we're talking to folks who are verbal instead of visual, we have to have some bullet points. So we'll do some bullet points, right? Okay, product managers, here's somebody holding up the trophy. I think that's the World Cup, right? Okay, so we got somebody on mute or somebody who wants to make a comment. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so we product managers, by the way, we love our products the way we love our children, assuming we have children, or our pets or our sports teams, right? We don't want anybody to run them down. We put the best face on them. We tell everybody they're perfect, even though we know they're not, right? So we're champions for our products, and we as product managers better know more about everything about it than anybody else, right? You can see the list here. You really have to channel your product. You have to love it. You have to think about it all day. Okay. We talk about it in different language depending on our audience, right? When we're talking to customers, we're mostly talking about benefits, unless we get through to features, but it's mostly benefits. When we're talking with our engineering and design friends, the makers, It's tech and its benefits. The features are in there, but not so important. When we're talking to our execs about the very same products, strategy and revenue is what they want to hear. Now, it's our job to make sure those all fit together, because if the strategy doesn't match the tech, doesn't match the benefits, well, there's a chance for you to work at product management at some other company pretty soon, right? But with every group, we stop and we think about who they are and what they care about and how we're going to tell the story about our product that puts it in the best light and is important to them, right? It's not just reading off the song sheet, okay? I include this because my belief over the many years has been, if I catch any of my product managers lying, they're out of a job that day, okay? If you're in front of a customer and the customer wants you to make a commitment, there are 50 different ways you can say no that are polite. But if you as a product manager make a commitment to a customer, it's real and it better be real. And if you do that without running it past your engineering team, show me the door, right? And we never lie to customers about what the features are or what the benefits are. That's for the rest of the company to do. That's what marketing's about in some places, right? But for me, it's essential because we're going to have a long-term relationship with our customers. We don't lie to them, right? Not allowed. Okay, last thing here, we try to be humble. Anybody who doesn't have Teresa Torres's new book should go buy it, by the way, about continuous interviewing. But we have to stay humble because the market changes ahead of us. People have different needs. We don't have to be the smartest people in the room. We just have to know who the smartest people are, right? And it's our job not to believe our own stories, not to breathe our own smoke here, right? Because we're going to put really good faces on things, but we have to know how far we're stretching it. So humble, 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 humble at every level. Okay, take a deep breath, right? That's what product managers do. Okay, so let's go to my hiring biases. And these are mine, so nobody else can tell me they're wrong because they're mine, but so what, right? And again, I'm thinking about heads of product or folks running product organizations who are going to be trying to hire people and their point of view, which is really handy if you're on the other side of the table. By the way, we've all been on both sides of that table. And I know Tom's heard this speech from me before, but be really generous and thoughtful and helpful to anybody who's looking for work, because tomorrow it could be you. Right? We're all paying it forward to the next generation of product folks. Okay, so let's go to my hiring biases. I don't know if you know, this was me in an earlier incarnation, right? By the way, this is me trying to explain to the sales team why they shouldn't discount the product. Okay, so I have a strong belief, and I've written a lot about it lately, this is much more than algorithms, right? Learning the grammar of a user story is fine, but it doesn't make the user story useful unless it's something that the world needs, right? It's not about filling out the template or the canvas. It's about filling it out with the things that are really smart and important. It's judgment, it's insight, it's putting it all together. Okay, so soft skills. Many, maybe even most of the product folks in tech come out of the engineering and the hard side of the business. I believe soft skills are at least as important, maybe more, as you move up the chain. Okay, as a junior APM, you can get away with just trying to convince the world that your 16-column spreadsheet is right, but it doesn't work, right? So here's all the things, you can read them there. Negotiating with people who don't work for you, understanding how executives think. The thing I call merchandising is, how do we get the rest of our company to appreciate all the hard work of our designers and developers and everybody else on our maker side, even if they don't understand it? How do we show off the good work? How do we make those people feel important? Because the only reason they're staying is because it's important. There's somebody across the street who's going to give them a raise if they quit, right? We have to figure out how to make our teams love our products the way we do, and the rest of the company appreciate it. Soft skills, soft skills, soft skills. Okay. As I said, you're going to tell the same product story to lots of different audiences in different ways. How much is their attention span? How much detail do they need? What do they need to know? You don't just take the same deck. Long-term thinking, right? Our job is to keep from driving the car into the dead end and finding out it's stuck too late, right? We are the people in the company who think long-term, because many other groups don't. If they do, that's great. But you should be thinking about what the impact of your pricing change is 6 quarters from now. or how you're going to do that upgrade, or what happens when we do this one special, only one time, never going to happen again thing for only one customer. And then the sales team all gets together over drinks and figures out how to get around us and do the same thing, right? Long term, okay? And then important here, and I say this all the time, we as product folks have to think about the behavior and the culture. So I don't know if anybody's tried to get a sales team to sell a product they don't seem to be selling, thinking that they don't like me or my product's not good. And the real answer is usually if you open up their compensation plan, they're getting more comp for the products they already know, and they can hit their number without taking any risks on selling anything new, and they're too busy for us, right? So when we think about why folks in our company do what they do, it's usually not about how they feel about me. It's usually their metrics or what their boss is measuring or how we hand out bonuses or the last person who was fired for telling the CEO it was a bad idea, right? So we as product managers, because nobody else works for us and it's all influence, we have to really think about and study why our company behaves the way it does in some crazy way and how we're going to get people to do what they need to do, even though we've got no stick. So if that doesn't scare you, we'll keep moving. All right. So, and this is important because I don't know if anybody knows Scott Selhorst. He's another veteran friend of mine, was in Austin. He's now living in the Denver area. He taught me something years ago. By the way, that's a cowgirl, not a cowboy, but I'll let you figure it out, right? A weekend at the Dude Ranch doesn't make you a cowboy. What does this have to do with anything? So it's important to me that people distinguish between I sat in a 2-day course where someone at the front of the room flipped slides and talked about product management. And at the end of the 2 days, I got a certificate that said I was a product manager or somebody who's actually a product manager. And so the point here is if you go to the Dude Ranch for a weekend and ride horses, you're still not yet a cowboy or a cowgirl, right? So I really write down, I mostly ignore all of the certification and very, very light education stuff as motivational, but I would never confuse somebody with a certificate with somebody who's been a product manager for a while and taken their lumps. My bias, okay? Now, there are some parts of the world geography where it's different, but I would never, ever, ever hire anybody as a product manager because they had a 2 or 3 day class or because they had a certificate or because they whatever, right? Really important. That's my bias. Not everybody has it. So I thank Scott for teaching me this, but really important phrase. Okay. All right. One last thing here. Okay. I don't know that that's me yet. I think I have one more consulting assignment before I look just that way, right? So let me lay out my hiring biases, right? So, and they should be obvious based on what I told you, right? So the number one thing that I counsel and coach every one of my heads of product on is that it's much, much harder to learn to be a product manager than to learn any product or any market. Okay, so if you're looking to hire product managers, the very first thing I counsel people to look for is somebody who's been a product manager before. Now, of course, this is going to create a problem in a minute for everybody who isn't one yet, right? And everybody wants to substitute. Well, but I'm an expert in my field. You guys are building 7-factor authentication systems, and I have a doctorate in 7-factor authentications, but you're not a product manager. Right? I have an MBA. Great. By the way, I have an MBA too, but the hint here is it's fine to have an MBA, but don't be an MBA. Right? I have a certificate. I was in some job. I can't tell you how many thousand people have told me over the years that they were in a job just like product management, but didn't have the same name. Okay, maybe. None of those for me are a substitute for having done the job before. Product owner is a weird case here. Some places product owners are really product managers. Some places product owners are just glorified Jira ticket writers. My sort is if you've been a product owner at a company that's not building tech as its core product, if you're a product owner at an airline or a bank or a government agency, the thing you're doing is probably the absolute minimum of what the Scrum book says, which is write tickets, review tickets, be with the team 24/7. And nowhere in the Scrum book does it ever say, talk to a customer who paid you money, right? So for me, the narrow Scrum product owner definition is for me a fail. And so somebody who comes to me with a product owner title, I'm going to do a lot of parsing to figure out whether they did the thing I think of as product management, or they did the thing I think of as unfortunately subservient to the engineers in some internal IT group, right? Good. My bias, everybody else can make their own choices. Okay, so notice I'm setting up a problem for everybody here. I believe that a seasoned product manager, somebody with a couple or 4 years under their belt, can learn any new tech or any new market in a few months. By the way, how do they do that? The first thing they do is they get out of the office and they go spend, now I don't know about COVID, right? But pre-COVID, post-COVID, you spend a few weeks on the road listening to customers, talking to them, not being judgmental, taking it all down, taking notes. If you don't know what your customers need after 3 weeks on the road, well, maybe you're not a product manager, right? But I think learning the craft of product management takes a lot longer. This is the reason that the bullet above it is here. I think it takes a couple or 3 years to really get your legs under you as a product manager. And when I bring in somebody who's a newbie, a first timer, I book on my calendar 1 to 2 hours a week with that person one-on-one for a year. I may not be there a year, but whatever, right? And we go over the work for the week and I show them the templates and why the templates are wrong again. And we talk about strategy and how things fit and the issues of the day. I think, so that's 100 hours of mentoring in the first year, right? I think at that point, we're ready to give you the badge that says you can drive by yourself, right? But, 2 weeks in the job, not so much. I did something similar, not so much. So again, this is my bias. And this is what I'm telling the chief product officers I coach. I think we got one more here, don't we? Right? So the advice I generally give is if you've got a very small team, hire first veterans and then novices, right? You don't want a team of 4, all of whom have not done this before. You can go halvesy, right? If you're only going to have 1 or 2 people, you've got to have folks you can delegate the work to who are trusted enough to run with it and not get in too much trouble unless they tell you, right? So it's fine to hire first timers. It's fine to hire novices, but not as a whole department and not the first hire, right? Really, really important. I spend a lot of time with folks who have 9 product managers on their team and not a one of them can find their way to the door. I got to tell you, it's not that much fun, but it does keep me in the style I'm accustomed. Okay, good. Let's keep going. So here's my biases. Not everybody agrees with them. They're not universal, but gives us something to set up. Okay, so now we've set up the problem. How do you get into product management if Rich is on the other side and he keeps vetoing everybody who hasn't been in product management before, right? It's the physicists would ask the question of how do you get a car into first gear, right? Well, once you're in first gear, it's pretty easy, right? But how do you get into first gear? So let's take that apart a little bit, right? Let's do it one at a time. There's the door. Really hard to get through the door. Even though there's 240,000 open product management jobs, anybody who's listening to me doesn't want to hire anybody who's new. So we have a mismatch. We have a real problem here. So let's go through and I'm gonna number these based on my preference, right? So the number one thing you can do if you haven't already been a product manager with a product manager title, what do? I think the best choice, right, there you are. The number one thing you want to do is look in your company, in your current company, and figure out who the product managers are and make a case and learn to know them and let them know you're interested and show them how smart you are. It's way easier to transfer within a company that's short of product managers because you already know the product, the executive team, maybe the customer base. If you're coming out of support, you know a lot about that. If you're coming out of a field SE job, you know a lot about the products. If you're coming out of development, I'm not sure why you want to take the pay cut, but there you go. Transferring into product management in your company is going to be way, way easier than the other things I'm about to list. So if you're at a company that has product managers and they don't all hate their jobs and they're not all quitting and churning out, that's your first choice. And notice I put a really big space here because second is pretty far from first. If you can't do that or you're not at a company or whatever, I'd be looking for connections soft connections, right? Get onto LinkedIn, figure out who you know at companies you're interested in, and go talk to them, right? If you have a mentor, tell your mentor what you're interested in. Notice this is a people issue. I didn't say get online and do stuff online. This is face-to-face when that's possible. Okay, if you can't do that, if you're a subject expert in your space, if you've been doing whatever crypto for a long time or something, then companies in crypto may in fact be interested in you, even though I told them not to be. Right? So being an expert at something is great, but most of us are not experts. Let's keep going. There are some really big companies with training tracks or associate product manager tracks, right? Now, they tend to be pretty specialized and competitive, but they exist, right? We used to call these the FANG companies, and then a bunch of them renamed themselves. I think it's now called MANA, M-A-A-N-A, if you're really careful, right? Okay, now, there's a fifth one here, which is I think what everybody else is doing if they don't know any different, which is the very cold start of looking at job descriptions on the web and applying and sending a resume. Of course, we're going to do that. But I got to tell you, it's a very low yield. It's very noisy. Having been the hiring manager at the other end of all these job portals and all these HR people who don't know the difference between project, program, and product, right? It's noisy, it's lossy, it's pretty terrible. And putting your resume in online, you're also faced with the 10,000 people who had zero qualifications for this job, who apply to every job at every company, right? So the people looking at these resumes are going to have very, very little time to figure out why you're a candidate, right? So you're welcome to do that, but you know, if you can do number one or number two, that's probably a 50x improvement in throughput or outcome, right? Don't expect job portals to be thoughtful or complete or well managed or to ever get to the hiring manager. Okay, let's keep going. So notice again, I put one above all the others because I think that's the best choice. All right, let's keep going. So now let's unpack number one a little bit. If you're at a company with a product management team and you'd like to work there, how do you raise your hand and let people know? So there's raising your hand. Thank you, right? So what are the things one can do within your company, right? Go hang out with the product managers, figure out who they are, chat with them, introduce yourself, right? Tell them you're interested. By the way, tell your manager you're interested too. There's nothing worse than hearing third hand that one of the people on my team doesn't want to work for me anymore and wants to be in another department. Not smart. So if you want to move into product, you probably need to tell your current manager that that's true, right? What else? I would look for ways to show my chops. Okay, is there a piece of analysis that everybody's too busy to do? Is there a bunch of surveys I can run for you? Can I follow people around for a day? How do I show that I have some product management chops without being in the job? I try to be helpful on occasion to the current folks who then know who I am, see some talent, and when there's a job, they can raise their hand, right? Good, I think there's one more, right? And then of course, watch for openings. They don't come around that often. So don't expect just because you did all these things that there's a job next week. You have to be there long enough to get to the right moment. But for me, this is the number one way you can get into product management at low risk, at low cost, without being unemployed. Okay, I'm going to catch my breath here. There we go. And we're going to shift just briefly to directors. We're going to have a very similar discussion and then get to Q&A. Okay, so product directors. And by the way, there's no consistency anywhere in the world in what we call anybody. Group product managers, portfolio managers, junior directors, senior directors. I understand at some of the really big companies like Google, there's like 9 levels of product manager titles. And gosh, it just leaves me crazy. All right, so let's talk about directors. There's the gears in some mechanism. Directors of product management are spending much more time thinking about how to keep things moving and working than they are about the individual product items and strategies, right? They're delegating all that. So directors tend to focus on, you can see it, process, teams, requirements, morale, merchandising, you know, keeping the executives from helping too much, right? Directors are not really doing the frontline individual contributor product management work. You see cross-functional, these are the people who work with all the other departments to get them to help even though they shouldn't want to, right? You might be standardizing how we get work done, so every product manager has at least a similar looking roadmap, right? Portfolio level stuff, how do we fit it together? Notice I didn't say be a product manager and also a director. That's not a winning strategy, right? So I think of it as, and not only mentor your product managers, the half-life of a director or product job is pretty short. Either you leave or you're left and they help you out. So you really want to think from day one about who you would replace yourself with if you won the lottery or whatever happened, right? Or you and the CEO had a discussion about, who's smarter and you lost, right? So those are things that directors do that individual contributor product managers don't do so much, right? They keep the trains running. Did we ship? Did we talk to customers? Did we do the things? Do we have a process? Can we get the salespeople to agree? Finance is in the way, whatever, right? They keep the trains running, right? And then, so therefore, as a director, you want to delegate as much of the actual product work to your team as you possibly can, because you actually have a different job to do. And that raises a question for a lot of people, which is, well, but I love being a product manager and I love the work I do. Well, you know what? Maybe you don't want to be a director. A lot of companies are now starting to create distinguished product manager jobs, just like they used to on the engineering side. So you don't have to get promoted to make more money. You can stay doing the work you love. If this isn't what floats your boat, maybe you don't want to be a director, right? Because it's different work, it's adjacent work. You get to mentor folks. You don't get to have your own product anymore. So if you love this because you have your own product, mumble, 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 right? Okay. And then of course, the very same question, which is, how do I as a senior individual contributor, let folks know that I think I want to be a director for whatever reason, right? Almost the same answers. There's the hands being raised. The very first thing you must do, I believe, is have a chat with your current boss, director or otherwise. And here I've scripted it for you, right? You don't say, hey, I want your job and I'm going to angle you out here and I'm a politician and wait, you're going down because I'm taking your chair, right? No, this is humble. It's thoughtful, right? I'm interested in what you do. I think I might want to do it someday. Can you counsel me on things I might need to brush up on, opportunities, right? It's generous, it's humble, it's appropriate. You never want to have your boss figure out that you're gunning for their job unless you are, right? Okay, and then what are the other things we can do? And here's a bunch, right? Now suddenly you have to start demonstrating leader skills even though you're not yet in the leader job. What do? We get on task forces even if we hate them, right? We mentor folks because that's what leaders do. One I love is every once in a while, if you're a senior, you actually push for somebody else's product to get advantage because you're thinking about the portfolio and the company, right? As product managers, we're always fighting for our own product, our own kids. I don't know about you, but my kid was the smartest one in her class every year. And so was every other kid, right? Speak at user conferences, whatever. What you're trying to do here is you're trying to demonstrate the director level, leader level, CPO level, VPO skills, even though you're not yet in the job, so that when it opens up, somebody says, oh yeah, you've been doing this already. You're a natural, right? Again, that's an internal one. Pretty hard to transfer from an individual contributor at one company to a director at another company, unless you've got something pretty special. So it's easier to get promoted in your own company than to both change companies and change levels. Okay, I think we're ready for takeaways and Q&A, so let's do that. By the way, anybody who missed it, this is a takeaway container. All right, so we'll have some takeaways. I think the product management is complicated, it's strategic, it's experience-based. I don't think anybody learns to be a product manager in a classroom, unfortunately, which makes it really hard, right? It's odd. I don't know why anybody does this. People accuse me of being mentally deficient for being in product so long, and maybe they're right, okay? But for whatever reason, everybody wants to do it this moment, and tomorrow there'll be something else, right? So just know that you don't have to be a product manager. Nobody has to be a product manager. It has to be a fit for you and what you want to do. Okay. as you've heard, it's really, really, really hard. It's not your imagination. Everybody trying to get into this is struggling to get through a system that doesn't want them. Now, when you get to the other side, suddenly everybody wants you and you're in great demand. So just know that this is hard, and that we all know it's hard, and it's going to take a lot of energy and time and guts, and not everybody gets there. Okay. And then if you're looking internally, you want to be showing your skills to the folks who you hope are going to pick you up. If you're looking externally, it's about networking, and not the digital networking, not the Ethernet kind. This is actually talking to real humans at companies you're interested in at length, and chatting them up and figuring out where the good opportunities are. By the way, a question you should ask everybody if you're talking to them about jobs is, are they liking their company? Would they recommend, what's the question I usually ask? If a dear friend or relative of yours told you they were considering a job at your company, what advice would you give them? Because often you'll be waved away by people who say, well, I hate it here. I'm in the market. I can't tell my boss, but the CEO had a bad childhood, and every Tuesday and Friday, he or she chews out some members of the executive team, and we're miserable, right? Do your homework, right? So there's our takeaways, right? It's not for everybody. It might be for you. It's hard to get into the door or up the ladder, and that's really the obvious way. I think you got to share your skills and you got to network. Neither of those is about spreadsheets, and neither of those is about writing tickets or knowing the Scrum book, right? This is about people and soft skills. Okay, so we'll stop for Q. Actually, before we get to Q&A, I just have one other thing. Here's how to find me and one of my office managers. If you're clever, you'll notice that my domain name, my last name, my email address, and my handle are all the same.
If you're clever, you can notice this.
Yes, if you're clever. That's right. And by the way, the reason that's true is because I bought my domain name in 1993 before the former Soviet Union was on the net. So I got there first. But anyway, so let's do some Q&A. Tom, how do we want to do this?
Let's see. I think if folks are interested in asking a question live, we'll try and take the live questions first. Probably, I'm guessing the easiest way to do this is if you there's a reactions button on the bottom of your Zoom client that says.
Oh, let's not be fussy. Whoever has the first question, just take yourself off mute and jump in.
Okay, that works too. I was going to say you can raise your hand if you
nah.
get out.
Whoever's brave, go.
Rich, what do you think about the differences between the product manager role and the product owner? It seems like there's a lot of overlap at some companies. As you noted, everyone defines product management differently. Yeah. Some companies tend to take that product management role and divide it into those two parts.
Yeah, so I don't believe in that at all. So I believe in the end-to-end full stack product manager. And on my teams, every single person on my team spends half of their time facing their engineering team, their maker team, and half their time facing the markets and the users and the customers and the competitors and the sales team and the world. I believe that's really the only way to excel at what we're doing. So when I see folks who divided the inbound and the outbound, or the product owner and the product manager, I think they're creating a whole series of organizational problems and communications problems. And I tend to see that the inward-looking folks, who I'll nominally call product owners, have very, very poor understanding and contact with the market, which means we're building a lot of the wrong stuff the wrong way. And the outward-facing, market product managers have very little understanding of what it takes to build anything. And so their expectations are always 10x or 40x. And every one of them tells me that their product owners and their development teams aren't very good and aren't very productive, right? I think we're setting folks up for this sort of we-they tribal division when we break the real job into two pieces. Now, the world can do whatever it does. The world can call anything whatever they want. But when I talk to folks who are product owners on their resume, I ask a bunch of questions because I don't know what they are. And if they tell me about interviewing customers and setting strategy and thinking about pricing and being on sales calls, I think of them as end-to-end full stack product managers. And when they tell me that the number one thing they got out of the Scrum book is they have to be available to their team 24/7, which is what the Scrum book says, then I'm pretty sure they never got out of the office to meet anybody who taught them anything, right? And therefore, a good half of whatever they're speccing is probably not very useful. And in general, what I see on those kinds of product owners, they have no organizational power, they have no clout, they have no voice. So even if they're really good, those kinds of organizations tend to treat them as business analysts who just push paper. Right now, it hurts me to say that. So there's a lot of great, talented people who are in product owner jobs and shouldn't be, because they're better than that. But what I see on the product owner side is the sort of de minimis, moving stuff from place A to place B and keeping the backlog clean. Yeah, grooming the backlog is important, but it's not your job. Your job is to figure out what the market wants and then put it in your backlog. I don't know if that's a longer answer than you wanted, Mark.
It's actually perfect for what I needed it for. Thank you.
Right. And I'll just say it again. I'll apologize in advance to everybody who has a product owner title and feels like they're a product manager, because I'm not trying to run anybody down or assault them. I'm trying to identify that when we make the role narrow and inward looking only, I think it's just not as good. Okay, who's next? Fire when ready.
Rich, this is Sandeep. My question is about directors.
Okay.
And you were saying, I'm in a dichotomy. You were saying that directors essentially mentor individual contributor PMs.
I would hope so.
They work on optimizing product processes. And I'm also assuming that they take care of executive expectations, essentially letting the ICs work independently.
Good. Yes.
But if your first 45 minutes with such a director was about how many customers do you speak? Why does that director need to speak to customers if all they're doing is?
Yeah, I was unclear. When I'm talking to the individual contributor product managers, that's my number one question, right? If I were talking to the director, my number one question would be, how often do the folks on your team talk with customers? Right now, by the way, there's other work for directors. One of the things that tends to happen is every product manager has their own roadmap, their own priorities, their own OKRs, whatever, right? So at the director level, we have to harmonize, we have to balance, we have to do the portfolio work to fund the right things. But I don't particularly expect directors to be doing their own interviews. What I expect them to be doing is intensely asking about and learning from their teams what their teams are learning in the interviews, because they have to represent that to the company. Now, if you have a team that doesn't know how to do good interviews, and many teams don't, then as a director, your job probably is to do the first 10 interviews with somebody and show them how to do it, right? And point out what was interesting about that discussion and make sure that they're doing it right. But there's a lot of work to do as a director that's not the IC work, that's not the interviews, that's not the roadmaps, that's not the stories. And so I think if you're doing both, it's hard to give full force on either side. If you're a director with only 2 direct reports, you're probably a player coach. But if you've got 5 people working for you, that's a full-time job. And if you're doing a product manager job and you're trying to manage 4 people, I think you're setting yourself up for failure.
In other words, you're saying that you can discount a director for not talking to customers, or do you say that he should sprinkle in some time to talk to customers after all?
I don't know that I have a strong point of view on that. I think it really depends what's going on. If you as a director have a team that's really out there learning what the market wants and they're bringing it back, I think you can learn from them, right? Or maybe you go along on some, but someone has to be doing this, and the best choices are the frontline product managers.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Somebody else came in. Go.
So on follow up with that question, let's say a director of product management with 5 product manager come and design, right?
Okay, sure, whatever.
Reporting in. So what would you consider as a successful or a success for a director in that role?
I'm going to go back to HP in the 80s because they taught me everything I knew about management, and then I forgot it. You're successful as a director or a manager if the people working for you are productive and happy and look good in the organization and are delivering, right? So for instance, folks who have a lot of turnover or churn on their team, there's probably something bad. Folks who aren't delegating, who are making bad hires, it's squishy, it's soft, it's hard to manage or measure. Here's the question I think every director should ask every one of their people at least once a week. What can I be doing to make you more productive, more strategic, happier, getting more done, more successful here, right? We as directors are servant leaders, right? And our job is to pass the work down to the people who may even be smarter than we are so they can do it. And our job is to remove obstacles. It sounds a lot like Scrum Master, but it's different, right? So for instance, a good instance here, often we're in the place where individual product managers aren't being allowed to talk to customers because the sales team is in their way. And it turns out as individual contributors, they don't have the clout, they don't have the executive ear to fix this problem. And so they're going to complain to me as a director or VP, and it's my job to negotiate with the head of sales or to complain to the CEO or to figure out some bribe scheme or whatever it is, right? As the director, I have to remove the obstacles to my folks succeeding, whatever that is. And so, you know, that's a two-way street, right? If they don't know how to do something, I'm going to show it to them. If they can't get the resources, I'm going to get it for them. If we're understaffed, I'm going to try to get more recs. You know, my job is to make my people successful. And usually, you know, when that's happening. Okay, deep breath. Who's next?
Hey, Rich, can I ask a follow on to that situation that you just
Please do.
described with the sales team? So, you know, let's say we've got 30, 40 product managers and they want to talk to customers. That can end up being a lot of discovery calls, and all account executives are just concerned about, hey, are you bombarding my account and so on.
That's really not what they're worried about. What are account execs really worried about? Tell me. You know, tell me what they're really worried about.
Well, they're worried about their opportunities, and are we going to like bother the customer with?
So
you know,
if they tell you the truth, account execs are worried that some product manager is going to screw up a deal by saying something they're not supposed to say, by admitting that we're not building the thing that the sales team promised we were building, by explaining that the features don't work the way they wanted to do. The sales teams are worried that we're going to blunder and wander through and break things and cost them commission and money and maybe their job.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and that's a reasonable thing to worry about, at least in some companies, right? So we have to think about this as a negotiation. You know, and so that's executive to executive. For instance, if I'm on the product side, I might think about, well, you know, we product managers are spending a lot of time helping you close deals on sales calls and explaining features and doing demos that you need us to do. Gosh, you know, we could be pretty busy the next few weeks, right? On the other hand, we have to have some controls here, right? So you can't have more than one product manager talking to the same customer, or at least the same individuals at the customer side if it's a big customer. You've got to take notes and share it with the team. Often we negotiate that the sales rep or the account manager gets to listen in but not speak and is on mute the whole time so they can see what's going on. By the way, after they do that once, it's not interesting. They don't worry about it anymore because they see what we're doing, right? This is about trust and it's about incentives. It's not about personalities. So as the director or VP, I have to understand enough about the sales, the real sales concerns, so we can negotiate some arrangement. Oh, another one here. If you're on like 1-year subscription models, the best time for product folks to talk to customers is after month 1 and before month 9. Because by the way, nobody in sales is going to bother talking to them until they come up on renewal, right? So open field, we're not getting in the way and it's far enough away from renewal that we can't break anything, right? You know, you have to put yourself in the shoes or whatever footwear of the people you're negotiating with to understand their issues so that we can work to an answer.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Good. And by the way, one other thing you'll learn from all salespeople, they're the reason the company exists. They bring in all the money. Their time's worth more than everybody else. You should just do what they say. Good.
So,
Who's next?
Rich, so I have a question on the same, like follow up to that.
Okay.
So the sales team is capturing the value, right?
No,
And
well,
product team is creating it.
Well, the sales team's capturing the money.
Okay. So my question is, as a director, how much I need to be an expert in the business strategy and in the domain that I am in for me to be successful?
It depends a lot on the company, but a lot. You really, really need to understand the business strategy. And by the way, if you're in the tech business, the business strategy and the product strategy aren't really a different thing. They're really not, because if we have a strategy for what we're building and somebody has a strategy for how to bring it to market that doesn't match, then we all get to work at a new company next week, right? But we need to understand every function in the company. You need to understand what tech support folks or customer support folks do and what their issues are. You need to understand what finance folks do and what their issues are. You need to understand what marketing does and why it keeps taking our really long sentences and shortening them into headlines that people can understand, right? As a director, as a VP, you really have to understand the company and how it works and where the bottlenecks are in a way that you don't as a product manager, because you have to manipulate or push around all the folks who you have no authority over to get things done. And that requires that you understand their goals, their metrics, how they're hiring. We have a lot of insight into what's working in the company. So I think of us as generalists, right? We have to be experts at that. And as you move up, it's more about that and less about the product.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Rich.
Good. Somebody else? Lori Briggs, you got a question for me? Sorry,
Hey, Rich.
I shouldn't cold call people, but I just couldn't.
No, I don't, but I am listening. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. Good. All right, we got maybe time for two more. Who's next?
Hey, Rich, I have a question. So I noticed that you had slides for new product managers, for director, but you didn't have anything for VP of product. I'm guessing it's for a good reason.
No, because if you're doing a deck that's supposed to last for 35 minutes, you can't cover everything, but all the same principles apply, right? If you're looking to hire a VP, everybody wants to hire somebody who's already been a VP, right? So the easiest way to become a VP is to get promoted from director at your current company. And if there's a big gap between directors and VPs, then to figure out what VPs do at your company and show that you can do it, so that when that opening comes up, you're a natural candidate. It's all the same story.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
A question.
Go.
My name's Stormy. Hi, Rich. Thank you.
Hi, Stormy.
Hi. So I actually am on week 3 of a brand new company. I'm hired as a product owner, of which I've had experience previously.
Mm-hmm.
I've not worked at a company previously that had both product owners and product managers.
And does your company have those?
They do now, yes.
Okay.
And so there seems to be this a pecking order of product manager over product owner, where previously I've always experienced they were almost synonymous, right?
Right.
Yet really that was my experience. And that said, I will say this company is in a lot of churn, a lot of transition right now. They're figuring things out. They're, really kind of, waggle basically.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
So I just want to get your thoughts as a product owner coming in who has worked at, previous companies where things worked really, really well, where we were churning out software every 2 weeks, and now all of a sudden I'm not, and I have a product manager to manage me.
Okay, well, I mean, nothing out of that made me happy to hear. So let's get a couple of facts out first. Every company's entitled to create any job they want and give any name to it they want and have it be as good or as bad or as silly as they choose, right? And usually that's because the executives came from some other company that was structured the same way, and for some reason they thought it was a good idea, right? So there's no requirement in the world that anybody be clear about the difference, or maybe there is no difference between product owners, product managers, and anything else, right? So you've got the situation you have. You know, if it were, you know, if I were king and I were the head of the company, I would break that in a minute, but nobody's hiring me to do that, right? And you know, I'm not a fan of the product owners, product managers across the aisle and who's in charge and I'm the boss of you. But from where I sit, I'm not sure I can fix your company, especially since you haven't told me what it is, and don't tell me the name of the company because nobody else should hear. Doesn't sound ideal. You might think about having a gentle, non-threatening discussion with your managers about ways you've seen this work better and what was different.
Yeah, and I
Right?
appreciate. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
actually already suggested an agile Slack book club, and so offered to do a lunch and learn to introduce truly the Agile Manifesto and the Scrum Guide.
Okay.
So maybe.
By the way,
that-
I don't think this is about waterfall versus agile at all. I think this is a power issue. This is a role description, whether you're doing waterfall or any of the 50 versions of agile, because I've done Scrum and Kanban and XP,
Yeah.
and right. I think the way we code is irrelevant. It's almost irrelevant to how we do product management, right? But
You're right.
right. So I think it's great to teach people the basics of agile. That's mostly going to be absorbed by your engineering and design team.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's great to do. I don't think it solves this issue directly. I'd make one other observation, and this is a little out of school, but it's a candidates market out there. Okay. As I said, there's 240,000 various named product jobs on LinkedIn today, right? If you find yourself at a company where they don't appreciate you and you can't do good work, and you're unhappy and you're having a lot of stomach acid being churned up and you hate yourself on the commute home if you're driving, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least in the US, we outlawed indentured servitude a long time ago, right? They cannot make you work at this company, and there's a lot of jobs open out there. So if you find that you can't succeed and you're not enjoying it and you're being trod upon, you know, by the way, 3 weeks isn't very long. I believe that if you're someplace less than, let's say, 5 months, it doesn't have to appear on your resume.
Okay.
So, you know, look yourself in the mirror and ask, you know, is this a company that's going to be able to make the change that's going to let me succeed and get ahead and feel good about what I'm doing? By the way, one other unrelated thing, just because I can't resist. There are people working at companies that are doing things that are bad. They are promoting hate speech. They're polluting the planet. They are giving away geodata about children to foreign governments. There's people out there working on products that are really bad. And I think there's no excuse for that. You should be able to pick yourself up and go work someplace where you're proud to tell your parents about the thing you work on. And if you find yourself in a place where your management is trying to get you to do things that you think are morally repugnant or against your beliefs, there's a big market out there. In fact, anybody who's in that situation, call me offline. I will help you find a job, because there's no excuse for working on something that's bad for the planet or bad for your morals or bad for whatever. There's plenty of good work to do. Likewise, there's a lot of companies that do a good job of managing their product teams and making them feel valuable and successful and letting them succeed. So if you're in a place where you feel downtrodden and you're already a product person, as you are, this is a good moment, right? I don't know if you guys saw, but more people quit jobs in November and December of last year than ever in the history of the United States, because they could, because people are hiring. So don't feel like you have to spend the next 6 years making an organizational change from the bottom, because that's really hard.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. That
Good.
was
Go get them and
encouraging, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
And drop me a line separately so you and I can have that conversation offline.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Good. It's 8 o'clock, but I can keep rolling. What do you want to do, Tom?
We've very frequently gone over, and so we don't have a hard stop.
Okay.
I can still see a number of great questions. I don't know, Ching Lee, if you wanted to ask your question directly, you've got at least several high fives from other PMs in the chat.
Okay, good. Go ahead, Ching Lee. Why don't you ask it, or I'll read it. I think easier if you ask.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. I was wondering about I'm a platform PM director, and platform PM typically we don't have direct revenue, target or MAU target.
Yep.
We have indirect impact on the product. Sometimes our customers are internal teams.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, do you have any advice, kind of like for platform teams, because I feel like it's really hard to sort of like present our work.
Yes, it is.
And show our impact.
It is. It's very hard. But let me take the other side of that for a minute. So if the work you were doing wasn't really important to the company, it wouldn't be getting done because it's expensive, right? So if you have a team of 5 or 6 working on your stuff, your company's spending $1 million or more per year for that team, right? The things you're doing are really important, right? But end customers may not see them, right? So I think the work you do, you can attach real benefits to the company. So for instance, it takes 13 minutes for any of our end users to run the reports on our system, and that's unacceptable. And we've done a bunch of backend engineering that took that from 13 minutes to 6. That's a win, and you better merchandise it. We are looking ahead at headroom on capacity or storage or throughput or something, right? And by the way, if we screw it up, the company can't grow. So you get to take some credit for growth. If you're working on security, well, shoot, I don't know a company that isn't sweating all of the malware and ransomware. And, if you're working on corporate security stuff, you better be proud of it, and your team better be proud of it, and find ways to show that it's important. For instance, you're saving the CEO's job and the chief counsel's job. It's a little harder. The other thing that I would say is every infrastructure, every backend team I know has a bunch of front-end teams or other product managers who all want 100% of that team's effort, right? So you got 5 different products that are on your platform, and every one of those product managers wants all of your attention, right? So you end up having to do some kind of business case or prioritization or analysis to figure out how much of each of those 5 product managers are going to get what they want. Because you can't satisfy all of them, you never can. So you've got all of the same issues where you're trying to figure out, okay, well, whose products are going to sell more if I do X, and which products are going to not crash so much and have high churn if I do Y, right? So there's business connection, but it's a little further away. So I think you have to be more creative in tying the outcomes, not so much the revenue, but outcomes. Our systems are up. We can add new customers. We can onboard folks easily. We're not getting in trouble in Europe for GDPR. You fill it in, right? We didn't get hacked today, and we have failover across the continents in case AWS on the East Coast disappears, right? Those are all things that the company desperately needs. Part of your job, I think, is to make them sound a little sexy, so everybody appreciates them and maybe even wants to work on that team.
Yes, make it sexy, and it also can be easily understood, because like sometimes like stuff are too complicated, like people just went over their heads.
That's
Thank
right.
you
And
very
by the
much.
way, yeah, I heard a great phrase. There's a woman named Karen Catlin who runs a thing called Better Allies, and it's all about how to be more sensitive to and understand your internal audiences and have a more diverse team. And she had a great suggestion. When you talk about making it simple, the phrase she suggested is it simple enough that my dentist can understand it? Notice I didn't take either of my parents, which is what everybody reaches for here, right? But sometimes you have to explain this in simple words to non-technical folks so that they see why it's important. You bet. Good. We got time for maybe 1 or 2 more. Fire when ready. Thanks, Ching Lee.
One question, Rich.
Go ahead, Charu.
We definitely talked about a director. If you have to hire a VP,
yes,
product management, what are some of the critical things you look for?
Okay, so I do a lot of this for my clients. And let me just tell you the failure mode that I see everywhere I go. Let's say they're a company that builds insurance, back-end insurance management software for the insurance industry. So they're a software company, right? The mistake they always make is they hire insurance experts who couldn't spell product if you gave them all the letters in the right order as the head of product. And that's a fail, right? So my advice is, if you're having to go outside to hire a VP of product, your number one criterion is that they've been a VP of product and they've run a team of a similar size. I do divide the world into B2B versus B2C because I think they're very different. But if you've been a B2B VP of product, gosh, you can be a VP of B2B product any place, right? If you're any good. And so I'm always pushing people to hire for experience in product before they go to subject expertise or familiarity with some big customer or sales or whatever else. There's this weird thing where we keep taking chief technical officers or VPs of engineering and we give them the product team. And then like 4.5 months later, everybody on the product team resigns. It's very predictable because the person who comes to the engineering side doesn't know what product folks do, doesn't appreciate what we have, can't give us guidance, can't give us the air cover at the executive level we need. So for me, starts with, if you're looking to go outside for a VP of product, get somebody who's done that job before. Again, it's the problem of how do you get promoted, but I wouldn't hire an individual contributor. I wouldn't hire a product marketer. I wouldn't hire a salesperson. One way to frame this, because executives never understand when I tell the story until I say, let's say we were going to form a software engineering team. What's the first question you'd ask of the person who's going to run that software engineering team? Anybody? Have you built a lot of software?
Yeah.
Right? If we were going to hire a chief financial officer, what's the first couple of questions we'd ask? Do you know how payroll works? And can you tell whether there's money in the bank? Right? If we were going to hire a sales VP, a chief revenue officer, we'd want to know things like, have you ever carried a bag and met quota and managed a sales team? Right? Completely obvious. Yet when we ask the question about product leaders, everybody's brain goes white. They forget everything, or they never knew. And so they substitute something else that seems near at hand. And so for me, again, it's almost exactly the same story. We're just one level up. Is that helpful, Charu?
Yes. I was. You're right. Doing VP and looking more like, so you're a director level. What are some other things you need to be looking into?
Again, I think it's way easier to get promoted from director to VP at your company than it is to jump from a director job at one company to a VP job at the next company. It's been done. People can do it, but it's harder.
Okay. Thanks, Rich.
Sure. Good. One last one. Anybody?
Yeah, I had a question, Rich. Put this in chat. I'll just read it. So a lot's been discussed about how product management interfaces with the individual contributors from design and engineering, like on a project team. But I don't hear a lot about the discussion is not about how product management interfaces with design and engineering hierarchy. So like the engineering directors, head of design, et cetera. So what are some models that work well for these types of interfaces, interactions? And, it's not really discussed because it's not part of the project team.
Yeah, so I tend to believe that if my product manager and somebody else's designer and somebody else's engineer can get along without my help, that's the best answer, right? So I don't care who hit whom, right? That teams form their own culture and trust and whatever else. If you've got a really good team, then those folks work together with each other, and it's my job and my peers' jobs to get out of the way. So I think the directors get involved with each other when we've got problems within the teams or we have to coordinate across teams. So I'd much rather have the lead developer, the designer, and the product manager on a team come to me and say, here's what we want you to do, whatever it is, right? Get them pizza, get them t-shirts, get them a better room, hire 3 more people, make them remote. Well, I don't care, whatever it is, right? If the team tells me that's what they need, I'm all for it if I can get it. When one person on the team, and maybe that's somebody working for me, comes and complains about somebody else on the team, my first question should be, so when you raise this issue with them, what did they say? Right? Because the last thing I want to be doing is intervening within a team, because it needs its own coherence, its own culture, its own trust. If I'm doing that a lot, then I think we've got a bigger issue, like maybe the team is broken, or we've got wrong folks, or it's wrong ratio. I don't know what it is. We got to go figure it out. But the best teams are the ones that work it out. And honestly, I don't care who does the work. I don't care who does which work. If the designer wants to play product manager and the product manager wants to play designer and it all comes out fine, don't tell me. I don't care, right? But directors tend to lean in when there's a problem. The other thing we do a lot of communicating at the director level about who's working and who's happy and what the issues are. So if I hear that there's some engineers on that team that are unhappy and might be looking to leave or have some issues, I rush over to their boss. Now, I may hide the name so I don't get anybody in trouble, right? But we're problem solvers. When we see the problem, we want to bring it to the folks who can address it. If my engineers are unhappy because they don't have the right development tools, I'm going to lobby for their development tools, and I'm going to push their director or VP to get them the tools they want. I don't actually care what tools they are, right? If that's the tools they need, I want to get them for them, right? As servant leaders, as folks trying to keep the trains running, we want to let people do their jobs if they can, and intervene when they can't, as humanely as we're able.
Thank you.
Okay, Tom, I think I'm out of gas here.
Getting ready for a well-deserved virtual round of applause. Thank you, Rich, so much. It's always fascinating to get your insight from all of your different organizations you've been through, and you've been certainly through enough trenches that you can kind of lay out the map and tell people, look out.
I wear a shirt because I didn't want to show the scars.
Fair. And anybody in product management for any length of time will acquire their own set of scars. It's a bit like being an extreme sports person. At some point, you will have a good collection of X-rays on the wall and stories to go with. So again, that's one of the great things about having a product management association, is to be able to learn from other people's scars, and not be the person that there was a great cartoon I saw some years ago, and the person was in an interview, and the hiring manager said, well, why should I hire you? According to your resume, you've goofed up everything that you've done so far. And the person said, well, if people learn from mistakes, I make enough mistakes to train your entire company. So smart people learn from other folks' experience, and that's what we're here to share. So if we can all help each other out, that advances the cause, as it were. So with that, I'd like to thank Rich for his time. We hope to stay in touch. You've got his website as well, and you have our website. Please stay tuned. We will be announcing next month's meeting, which should be around the first Wednesday of the month. And we'll have details announced on the website and on the mailing list soon. Any other questions or things, feel free to drop us a line. I can be reached at tom@svpma.org. Or you can reach the board at board@svpma.org. If you have other questions, love to hear some feedback, any suggestions, ideas, other improvements. This is us listening to our customers, as Rich suggested. All right, thanks, and we hope to see you on the next meeting. Thank you all.
Good evening.
Thank you so much.